Huh?
Guys, let's go over to Joshua, right? Joshua, you want to make some opening comments, opening remarks on the subject of blockchain and logistics?
Sure. So, I mean, it's interesting because I'll be honest, most of the time I talk about blockchain DLT stuff, I have an audience that is like, what is this blockchain thing? It's hilarious, the difference in conversation. I'm enjoying this, let's put it that way. But like, for example, I teach a lot of the ACAMs, which are the anti-money laundering people in the country for the banking industry, about what blockchain is for money laundering, and it blows their minds. Absolutely blows their minds. I'll give you the short version. Normally, they know who the people are. They just don't know how the money is moved. I'm like, flip the paradigm. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, you know exactly where the money is. You just don't know who the people are. They're like, oh, now it makes sense. Blows their minds. So I have a lot of fun with this. But with you guys, it's and gals, it's fascinating because I get to talk a little bit deeper about what the uses of blockchain are, not just introducing the technology. And if anybody has problems with blockchain understandings, yell, I'm happy to discuss. Just in case, just pointing it out. No, in terms of logistics, it's fascinating. I deal mostly with information, but information has a logistics chain just as goods do. Okay. We deal with supply chain risk management. That's part of NIST CSF. That's part of the NIST cybersecurity framework. We deal with bill of materials. I mentioned before, software bill of materials. That is, if you're in the serious geek technology world that I'm in, you've got things like OpenSSL had a vulnerability. Well, so many products had OpenSSL in it and nobody knew it. So Heartbleed took over the entire world for what, a few weeks? Okay. So we're talking not so much about the movement of goods. We're talking about the bills of materials, the manifests, what's in what you use every day, what's in or what's carrying your information from place to place. The SolarWinds debacle over the last few days, which I'm sure all of you have heard about. I'll be fascinated, Pedram, to talk about why blockchain is inherently insecure or secure. And I will disagree with you. And I'm happy to talk with you about the security of it at a future date or later today. I'm totally cool with that. It sits on insecurity. You're incorrect, sir. It sits on cryptography, which is secure. Now, if you want to start talking quantum cryptography or quantum decryption, we can have a chat. But unless you want to talk about that, it sits on cryptography, which is secure. But again, I love to talk about that stuff, Pedram.
Yeah.
Am I saying your name right? Is it Pedram? Pedram?
Yeah. So let's do this.
It's Pedram.
Yeah,
Pedram,
let's open it up. Yeah, I'm going to open it up to Q&A, and we'll put this topic on. And Pedram, I'd love for you to share your thoughts with us when we do that, and that'll be a great conversation. But keep going, Joshua.
So, okay. So
I mean, here's the simple thing. I just wanted to add on to that comment. You said information is what it is. And, you know, if you look at the participants list right now, who's the real Silvio?
Well, Silvio asks himself that every day. Okay. Let's be
But if you look at the participants list, right? So this is the underlying technology. The underlying technology is not cryptography. The underlying technology is the personal computer. The personal computer sits on a pile of insecurity. And you just made an example of it with OpenSSL. And I just made an example of it because you can't tell me who's the real Silvio.
Well, it depends. Pedram, wait, that depends. Bear with me for 1 second. What I mean by it depends is if I knew Silvio from meeting him in real life, from shaking his hand, having a conversation with him, enjoying his company, because obviously he's a nice guy. I mean, obviously you can just see from that curl of hair that drops over his glasses, which I can never replicate. He's obviously a nice guy, okay? And if I've met him and I know him personally, and I've known him for decades, I mean, Silvio and I, we go way back, like all of 10 or 15 minutes. And, can I then know that that's the real Silvio? And the answer is maybe. Over a Zoom call, not as much. These days with Adobe Voco and face-to-face or deepfakes, as you might know them by, it's a lot harder to do, okay? So there's a lot of ramifications to what you say. But if you want to talk the security and the foundation of, and somebody said it earlier, I apologize, we all believe that security sits on faulted base principles, which is why asymmetric encryption was brought about, so that I can send a message through an untrusted channel and still have it get across in a trusted fashion. Okay. So that I can, no, don't turn the camera off. You want to do that? Come on, turn the camera back on. We got to see your face. We're good. I don't care if you're scratching your back. We're good here. So what we've got to do is understand that we may sit on untrusted primitives, untrusted situations, untrusted channels of communication, but what we have to have are methods of communicating securely across those untrusted channels. That's the entire Byzantine fault problem that blockchain and cryptocurrency and so on and so forth rest upon, are they not? Okay.
Yes.
So if you have a Byzantine fault problem, which is that you have an untrusted channel, for example, in the military world, and Hudson, back me up on this or laugh at me, feel free, whichever works. In the military world, we often have untrusted channels. Okay. Has the enemy broken this encryption? Has the enemy gotten a tap back in the 40s and 50s on that wire? Okay. Or whatever it is. Have they developed a capability of tapping fiber optics that I cannot detect? You always have to assume that they have a capability at least one level beyond what they have demonstrated to you. Hudson, so far so good? Or am I speaking out my other orifice?
No, you're sounding good.
Okay.
You haven't broken yet.
Thank you. So if we have to determine, or excuse me, if we have to assume that the enemy is only secure if the bad guys are less than 33%. Look, if they're betting against you in poker and there's a team against you, you're screwed. Okay, let's be honest. So you can only let it go so far. But anyway, and by the way, there are ways to get around that. But anyway, if we have to assume that the enemy has capabilities at least one level up from what we've had demonstrated to us, we have to come up with solutions that are at least 2 or 3 levels beyond that. That's, again, and I'm going to harp on asymmetric encryption. It's one of the most brilliant inventions of our time. And in my world, okay, sorry, I'm a geek. In my world, asymmetric encryption is unbelievably beautiful, wonderful, and a real pain in the ass to get working properly. Yes, I agree.
I have no issues with encryption. I've actually worked on quantum secure S boxes. My issue is that if you look at blockchain as like a diamond, then compared to a diamond ring, what breaks on a diamond ring? Is it the diamond?
No, it's the prongs. It's the setting.
It's always the prongs. So what I'm saying is the prongs make blockchain insecurable because you're looking for Byzantine fault tolerance or quorums. But the issue that we're talking about here is that the information mediums can be compromised.
Yes. Okay. So your
point.
And
we've already just done it on this call where we're talking about blockchain logistics security and the military. Well, there's probably state actors and some unencrypted connections.
On some of the encrypted connections or unencrypted connections? Sorry.
I said there's unencrypted connections.
Unencrypted. I didn't hear you correctly. I apologize. So you're right. Look, one of the truisms in information security is for a sufficiently large network, you do not know how many people that you do not want in your network are already in your network. Okay. It's a truism because most of the time it's true. And so we can sort of take it for granted. All right. I had a large government contractor, US government contractor go, what's the likelihood that we've actually been breached? I said, 100%. They said, wait, what?
Exactly.
You have 75,000 employees and you didn't specify a time frame. So I'm specifying from the beginning of when you had your network to now, over that time period, 100%. Now, how big the breach, how serious the breach, how much did they get, whatever, I don't know. Those are different questions. But what's the possibility or probability rather that you've been breached? Absolutely 100%, not even a question. And it blew their minds. And then they got really
hey guys, can I interrupt for just a second? So we sort of sidelined on a tangent,
Sorry.
right? Which is don't apologize because look, security is an underlying factor with regards to logistics, right? And especially if we're talking about DoD and military logistics. And so I don't think that this conversation is necessarily out of scope. I'd like to hear from other folks if you guys think that this conversation is still in scope. What I'd like to do, Joshua, is let you go ahead and finish whatever you want to say about logistics and supply chain, and then I'd like to actually come back and talk about this because I do think, and even more importantly, the first week in January we're going to do an event on blockchain and cybersecurity because it has a tremendous impact on many of the use cases, not just logistics and supply chain. But Joshua, go ahead and
real quick.
Finish what. Yeah,
real quick. So I'm more concerned with the movement of information, if that makes sense. And in the movement of information, it's still logistics. It's still an important piece of how do we get from place to place? How do we get from person to person? Oh, well, that's just standard. No. The logistics is an important part of this because there's a payload. There's a payload. In my case, we're doing compliance information and information provenance. That payload is just as important to me as, well, Hudson's tank is to him. Okay. Hudson, I apologize for picking on you, but you're there and the tanks are a great analogy.
I didn't know Hudson had a tank.
Well, I mean, you know, come on, you didn't see his backyard? Dude, there's a half track, there's a tank. Anyway. But Pedram, your point about insecurity is incredible. It's lovely. I love people examining the foundations of what we do because it makes us examine them and do it better. I mean, you know, I do security, which is why I own multiple sets of lockpicks. I actually just got a new set because that way I can test, okay? And I can check that the security on the locks that I specify for my clients are actually valid and actually good. All right. Now, I don't claim to be the best lock picker, but it's fun playing with. My point is that when you talk about logistics, it's not just the security of the payload, the truck, the whatever, the tank. And it was mentioned before, Gerard, I think that was you that mentioned it. You know, is it more important for the security of the information, the efficiency and cost benefit of doing it in a blockchain fashion? What really did they care about? And Hudson came back with, well, yes, you know, effectively. And it's a fascinating topic to see, can we make it from untrusted basis, which I think, Carlos, you were the one that mentioned that. Silvio, excuse me, Silvio said that. You know, and also make it more efficient, also make it cost effective, also make it valid. But it's even if you don't like blockchain, it's a way of examining your foundational elements and a way of understanding them better so that you can actually have more security rather than simply depend on, well, that's the way we've always done it.
I'd like to sort of circle back to the issue of cybersecurity, right? That was brought up earlier.
Right.
And that is so blockchain. So the underlying question or concern is, if the underlying technology, meaning people's personal computers, is insecure, right? Then how can we trust that the information on the blockchain with regard to logistics is can be trusted? So I'm open.
You know,
I'm open for anybody's comment on that.
I'm going to throw a comment out there and then I'm going to shut up. Okay. I don't want to monopolize. And I don't care what I say or Pedram says or anybody says, there's problems with trust. You can't 100% trust anything. Anybody that tells you that something's 100% secure, they're selling you something and they're lying. Okay. Let's be clear on that. Okay. The only secure computer is the one that's at the bottom of a mine covered in concrete with the power cord snipped. Okay. And even then, somebody with a jackhammer and a real bad desire to get to it, well, they can get to it. So
what was it today, Josh? Let me add something to what you're saying. There was an article that came across from, I think it was ZDNet, and I'm going to post it here in the chat, about how academics have turned RAM into Wi-Fi cards to be able to steal from air-gapped networks.
Yeah. I mean, Stuxnet was designed to go across an air gap.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a lot of problems there. And
you have the same problem with USB drives, right? I mean, so you're exactly right.
SneakerNet works across air gaps. So, you know, the idea is that you've got to be really careful with things and you have to understand the limits of your trust. And Pedram in the chat mentioned zero knowledge, zero trust, that kind of thing. Those are great. But even then, you've got to realize that implementation of them can include flaws that could reduce or degrade your zero knowledge or zero trust, right, Pedram?
Absolutely. I think one of the issues that we've have, and it happens across the field, right? So economics theory, it needs to be changed to integrate what does it mean when you have AI. Cybersecurity needs to be changed. What does it mean when you give an AI a microphone? Right? Because you could have multi-million-dollar worth of development in your AI algorithms, but if I have a microphone close enough to your GPU, I can infer the hidden layers of your neural network. So like, these are not levels of cybersecurity that we're frankly competent enough to address. If you really want to look at how do you deal with this securely, what you have to do is look at China, right? They've got their own operating system. The government spends billions of dollars in cybersecurity on their own platforms, and we don't.
Yeah.
So you've
so we're 30 years behind in cybersecurity, and now we want to do blockchain, and it's like, yay! Well, but a lot of shit's gonna need to get fixed first.
Right. Gosh, there's so many topics I want to take this on. what's the solution, right? How do we, to the best degree possible, secure that underlying cybersecurity hole so we can trust our logistical supply chains?
Well, actually, that's really interesting because one of the foundations of blockchain is the idea that some people are, or some organizations or some entities, whatever you want to call it, are untrustworthy, right?
Mhm.
Well, just extend that. The idea is that at some point there will be a disaster. At some point there will be a problem. At some point there will be an issue. Blockchain is not, you know, we talk about chains of custody, perfect chain of custody, and these are true. You can get an amazing chain of custody, but it doesn't mean that at some time in the future, someone won't break it. So what we have to do is we have to have contingency planning. We have to have incident response plans. We have to have, hey, even if it's a 1 chance in a million, guess what? Somebody's going to take that and they're going to hit the jackpot. They don't have jackpots on
100%.
lotteries, and you know, they don't have people buying lottery tickets because no one wins. You know, the corollary of that is that they don't build billion-dollar casinos because everybody wins. Okay.
All right. Well, listen. Let me ask this question.
Sure.
I want to go to Bitcoin for a second because I'm a big fan of decentralization, and I think that solves a lot of problems. Right? How does this issue of the underlying security hole, right? How does that relate to the fact that on a Bitcoin transaction, the message gets broadcasted to lots and lots and lots of nodes, people, and entities. They're all involved in validating, and does that Byzantine fault tolerance, does that essentially does that solve it? Like what's that?
So you want to go to Bitcoin? Great. Let's talk about a 51% attack. I mean, because I can have an absolutely legitimate chain with perfect transactions and wonderful transparency and everything, and a 51% attack can come along and destroy my chain and add its own chain.
Right, but if you did that, I would have complete visibility that it happened. So at least
you could, yeah. You could, but it's still
and the larger the network, right? The larger the network. So for somebody to, and there was a 51% attack on the Bitcoin network in 2014.
Yes, there was.
But for someone to execute a 51% attack on the Bitcoin network today would be much more difficult.
It would and it wouldn't. As a matter of fact, in 2015, I'm not sure, there was a hashing pool that actually voluntarily reduced the size of its hashing pool because they realized
that's the same one I'm talking about, right?
No. There's different then, because there was a 51% actual attack. They did not perform a 51% attack. They realized they had the opportunity to do it and went, "Whoa, we're trying to be good guys. Let's not do that."
Right. It's essentially called the same thing. It wasn't actually what happened was that as their hashing rate became larger and larger, and again, it's a decentralized public view, so everybody could see it. If they crossed that threshold, they would have destroyed their investment and all their holdings. So they voluntarily scaled back.
So all I have to do is decide not to make any profit. I start a hash pool where I'm putting all the money that we get back into the people, which means I have a higher return rate on your investment, right? And then I'm going to be attractive. And all of a sudden I have 51%. It's going to take a long time. I might have to have access to hydropower for cheap electricity, but I could do it. That's not a question. I could do it if you wanted to.
I think you could do it in 2015. I don't know if you could do it in 2021.
I know somebody right now who has 17% of the entire hashing power of Bitcoin. Him, with what he already has, could do it in a matter of a year or two. Not a problem. It's possible.
Yeah. And the other side of it is just to be able to give it that security that it has now, it has to do something to deal with Sobel attacks. So essentially, if you're talking about a storage of value, which is designed to protect assets and protect the world, you're using the wrong medium, because most of our, loss are going to be directly related to global warming. So the bigger that hashing pool gets, the worse off the planet is going to be. And a lot of people say, oh, we're 40% of Bitcoin is solar powered, but that 30 or 40%, you're talking about hundreds of millions of homes that you can power with it.
I want to sort of stick on the security aspect as opposed to the environmental aspect. Because
I think environmental security is related to everything. If we get sick and die and all the fish are gone, then the cybersecurity is not going to matter.